My name is Esther Delaney, and I'm 67 years old. I've lived most of my life in the small town of Rockdale, tucked in the quiet, green folds of upstate New York. It's the sort of place where people nod at you in the grocery store even if they can't remember your name, and where the old red brick church still rings its bell on Sundays. My husband, Thomas, and I raised our children here, and though the winters can be cruel, the seasons always reminded me that life moves in cycles, that even after the deepest cold, something green always grows again. Thomas was my high school sweetheart, a man of few words but steady hands. He built our home, not with blueprints, but with calloused palms and sheer will. It wasn't big or fancy, but it stood strong, just like he did. We had 2 children, a son named Jonah and a daughter named Melanie. When we were younger, I was the kind of mother who showed love by doing casseroles hot on the table by 6, socks neatly folded in drawers, scraped knees kissed behind closed doors. I never needed anyone to clap for me. I just did what was needed. But aging has a strange way of peeling the layers back, revealing who is grateful and who simply got used to taking. It started quietly. That's how betrayal often begins, not with a shout, but a sigh. About 5 years ago, Thomas's health began to fade. His once strong hands trembled when lifting his morning coffee, and I noticed how often he'd stare out the window, eyes cloudy and far away. Parkinson's, the doctors said, and it would only get worse. So I became his nurse, too. I didn't complain. What vows mean anything if not in sickness and in health? I managed his medications, adjusted his diet, learned how to help him in and out of the shower, how to lift him when he fell. We sold his truck, then his tools. Our world shrank to doctor visits, pill schedules, and the sound of him shuffling in the night. Melanie came by occasionally, always in a rush. She had her hands full. A career, a family, 3 kids under the age of 10. I understood. I didn't expect much. But Jonah, he lived out in Arizona now, always too busy to visit but quick to text me memes and half-hearted updates. I suppose I didn't realize how invisible I had become to them until Thomas died. It happened in early January, one of those bitter cold mornings where the air bites your bones. He passed quietly in his sleep, the way good men deserve to go. I held his hand and whispered our favorite psalm. The house felt like it exhaled with him, as if it, too, knew it had lost its heartbeat. The days that followed were a blur of arrangements and casseroles I didn't want. Melanie took the reins, planning the service, organizing the music, picking the flower arrangements. She was efficient, like she was checking boxes off a to-do list. I appreciated the help, even if it felt more like obligation than affection. The wake was held at the community center on a gray Saturday afternoon. Old neighbors came, many of them using walkers now, like me. They shared stories I hadn't heard in years. Jonah flew in, looking tired and distracted. His eulogy was fine, polished, but it didn't feel like Thomas. I was seated on a folding chair near the front. Melanie came over just as the crowd started to thin. She leaned in, her perfume sweet and too strong. She smiled, but her words, "Mom," she whispered, tucking my hair behind my ear like I was a child. "You can go back to the nursing home now. You don't need to stay here anymore." I blinked. "What?" "The home. Where you were staying before Dad got worse," she said softly, as if it were already decided. "We've already spoken to the director. They're expecting you next week." And just like that, my world tilted. For context, 6 months before Thomas died, I had a mild stroke. Nothing catastrophic, thank God, but enough that Melanie insisted I temporarily move into a nearby assisted living facility while she figured things out. I went against my gut because I didn't want to add more stress to the household. But the plan was always to return home after Thomas's passing. That house, that life, it was mine. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "I don't think I'm ready for that. I was only there because your father needed care." "But Mom," she interrupted gently, the kind of gentle that grates like sandpaper. "You'll be safer there. There's staff, emergency call buttons, everything. You're not alone there." I swallowed. But I'm not alone here either. She touched my shoulder. Let's not make this harder. You're grieving. This is what's best. I've already moved some of your things. I didn't want to overwhelm you during the wake. She had already moved my things? Already packed away the fragile remnants of my life like old winter clothes? I sat in silence as she turned to hug a cousin, my body motionless, while the room around me buzzed with soft conversations and the clinking of disposable coffee cups. My husband had only been dead for 4 days.
4.
And my daughter had already evicted me from the life I'd built with him, from the home I helped pay for, scrubbed, cooked in, rocked babies to sleep in. The betrayal wasn't loud. There were no slamming doors or screaming matches. It came like frost, quiet, invasive, and bone deep. I left the wake early. Nobody noticed. Jonah had already flown back that morning. Melanie was too busy organizing leftover pastries and chatting with her in-laws. I went back to my house alone. I sat in the living room, listening to the creaks in the walls, the familiar tick of the old mantel clock, the silence that had once been comfort and now felt like a sentence. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had shifted. They had mistaken my grief for weakness, and they were about to learn that age does not make you fragile, it makes you dangerous. Because women like me, we've buried dreams, husbands, and children's tantrums. We've held families together with casseroles and prayers. And when you turn your back on us, we don't beg. We plan. The next morning, I stood in my kitchen and made coffee. Not for anyone else. Just me. I used the chipped blue mug Thomas had always called mine, though it had no special design or inscription. Just the right weight in my hand, the right balance. Funny how the smallest things hold the most meaning when everything else feels pulled out from under you. The house was still.
Too still.
It had always been quiet these past few years, especially as Thomas declined, but this was different. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, not peaceful, but empty. And now it wasn't just my husband who had left. It was the illusion that I still mattered to the people I had given everything to. I didn't call Melanie that day. She didn't call me either. Instead, I began to take small inventory, not of objects, but of truths. Truth number 1. I had raised 2 children who no longer saw me as essential. I was a task on their list, a responsibility they hoped to delegate and minimize. Truth number 2. Somewhere along the line, I had made it too easy for them to forget who I was. I thought back to my younger years, working double shifts as a nursing assistant, taking night classes in between diaper changes and baseball games. Thomas and I never had much money, but our home was filled with presents and warmth. I made Halloween costumes by hand, packed lunches with little notes, sat through every recital, game, and heartbreak with tissues in my purse and encouragement on my tongue. I remembered when Melanie broke her arm falling off the monkey bars. She had been 8, terrified, crying all the way to the hospital. I didn't sleep that night, just sat by her bed, stroking her hair. That's what mothers do. We sit by their beds. We swallow our needs. We get quiet so they can be loud. And now, in my oldest years, I was being told, politely, calmly, to go away. To disappear into a beige room with shared meals and scheduled game nights. To play bingo while someone else's daughter forgot to visit.
No.
That would not be my ending. But I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. That's not how I handle things. Instead, I made a plan. I walked through the house that day, not like a mourner, but like a woman taking inventory before a storm. I opened closets, peered behind doors, sorted photographs.
Some I kept.
Some I boxed. Some I burned. Melanie had moved a few of my things already, mostly clothes, a few framed pictures, my medication. She hadn't touched the sewing room, though. That small room at the back of the house, the one with the worn floral chair and the faded yellow curtains, was my space. My sanctuary. And apparently not valuable enough to pack up. Good. They had forgotten something. I stood there in that room for nearly an hour, staring at the wall where I'd hung a small cross-stitch Thomas had framed for me decades ago. It said, "Still she rises." A silly gift, maybe, but prophetic. That night I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Mr. Lewin, the attorney who helped Thomas and I draft our wills and financial plan 5 years ago. The second was to Ms. Carla Graves, the director of the nursing home where I had stayed during my recovery. The third was to Clara May, my childhood friend who now ran a small bed and breakfast 2 towns over and had been offering me a room and a slice of peace for as long as I could remember. I didn't go into detail with any of them. I just said, "I'm thinking of making some changes. I'll be in touch." Then I sat down and wrote a letter to myself. Not a journal entry. A declaration. It read, "Esther, they think you're done. They think they've written your ending. But you're the one with the pen. Write something they'll never forget." The next week, I allowed Melanie to escort me back to the nursing home, as she had planned. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just smiled softly and let her think she had won. She walked me to my new room like a nurse walking a patient into a recovery ward. "It's cozy," she said. "You'll like it. Everyone's really sweet here." I nodded, looking around. The room was small, with pale walls and a single window that looked out onto a sad patch of grass. "Thanks, dear," I said. "You've been very thorough." She didn't catch the edge in my tone. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. "Okay, I'll leave you to settle in. I've got to run the kids to soccer." Of course she did. She kissed my cheek, her lip gloss cold. Then she was gone. I waited a full hour before calling Clara May. "I'm ready," I said. She laughed. "Oh, it's about time." By the following morning, I had arranged for a courier to pick up several items from my house. My sewing machine, my journals, one particular metal tin hidden under the sewing table, which held some of Thomas's final letters and a small envelope of emergency cash we had saved over the years. Then I called Mr. Lewin again. "I want to revise my will," I said. "Of course," he replied. "And what changes should we make?" "All of them." Because here's the thing, I wasn't just planning an escape. I was orchestrating a realignment. The truth is, Thomas and I had done better financially than our children realized. He had taken out a second life insurance policy after his Parkinson's diagnosis, quietly, privately, because, in his words, you never know how the kids might change when they think you can't see. That policy? It had been left entirely in my name. No contingencies. No directives. A quiet cushion. A powerful one. I spent the next week inside that nursing home smiling at nurses, joining the knitting circle, and reading the newspaper like any other resident. But behind the calm, I was working. I asked Mr. Lewin to establish a trust fund, not for my children, but for Clara May's granddaughter, who had just started community college on scholarships and dreams. I arranged for my home, the one Thomas built with his bare hands, to be put up for sale in a quiet, off-market transaction, with all proceeds directed to a foundation that helped widows with housing and legal resources. I wrote letters to both Jonah and Melanie. Not angry ones, not bitter, just final. They'd receive them later. For now, I smiled. I played my role. Let them think I was tucked safely away. Let them believe I had quietly surrendered. But I hadn't surrendered. I was watching, waiting, and preparing to rise. A month later, on a crisp February morning, I left the nursing home. Not in an ambulance, not in a pine box, but through the front door, pulling my own suitcase behind me. I had given Carla Graves, the nursing home director, notice the week before. "My family believes I need full-time care," I told her calmly. "But what I need is full-time respect." She smiled. "Then I wish you freedom, Miss Delaney." Clara May picked me up in her dusty blue truck, the heater rattling like an old man clearing his throat. She whistled when she saw me, wrapped in my pea coat and walking without my cane. "You look like a woman on a mission," she said. "I am," I replied. We drove for 20 minutes, past the worn outskirts of Rockdale and into Briar Hollow, where her little B&B sat nestled between 2 maple trees. It used to be her grandmother's farmhouse, but Clara had turned it into a 5-room guest house with charm and character. I took the smallest upstairs room, the one with lace curtains and a view of the lake. It was perfect.
Quiet. Mine.
For the next week, I lived in peace. I took walks every morning. I cooked when I felt like it. I stitched a new quilt, not for anyone else, but just because my hands needed purpose again. And while I stitched, the final phase of my plan was unfolding. Melanie and Jonah had no idea I had left the nursing home. I hadn't told them. I hadn't needed to. I let them keep living under the illusion that I was tucked away, powerless, and out of sight. That illusion had always served them better than the truth. But one morning the phone rang. It was Mr. Lewin. "I mailed the letters as you asked," he said. "And the real estate deal closed yesterday. The check's already in the foundation account." "Good," I said, setting my teacup down gently. "Thank you." There was a long pause. Then he added, "You know, Esther, not many people your age would do something like this." I smiled. Then maybe more people my age should. That afternoon, Melanie called. It was the first time in weeks. Her voice was sharp, frantic, like someone who had been hit by a wave she didn't see coming. "Mom," she snapped, "what is this letter? What do you mean you're selling the house? And why did you leave the home without telling anyone?" I waited a moment, then said softly, "I didn't know I needed permission. That house was supposed to stay in the family." "For who?" I asked. "You? The same daughter who packed up my life before the funeral leftovers were gone? The same one who told me to disappear?" Her silence was long. "You're upset," she finally said, her voice quiet now. "No," I said calmly. "I was upset. Now, I'm in control. I was only trying to do what was best.
For you.
Not for me." Another silence. "You think I don't know how hard it was for you growing up?" I added. "I know I wasn't perfect. I didn't take you to Europe. I didn't buy the latest gadgets. But everything I did so you and your brother could stand on your own. And now you are. So stand." She hung up. I didn't hear from Jonah for 2 more days. When he finally called, he tried a different approach. "Hey, Ma," he said, too casual. "I got your letter. You sure this is what you want to do?" "I am," I said. "But what about your grandkids? Don't you want to leave something behind for them?" I smiled to myself. I am leaving something behind, but not for people who only remember me when money's involved. He was silent. "Take care of yourself, Jonah," I said, before ending the call. That was the last time I spoke to either of them. And you know what? It didn't break me. In fact, it set me free. I stayed with Clara May for 2 more months while I made arrangements. I rented a small 1-bedroom cottage by the lake. Nothing fancy, but it had a porch swing, a real fireplace, and a garden I could tend without anyone hovering over me. I furnished it with pieces I loved: a reading chair, soft lamps, old quilts. I didn't bring much from the old house. Just my sewing box, some letters from Thomas, and the blue mug. That summer, I launched something new: the Still She Rises project, a small, local initiative in partnership with a widow's foundation my house proceeds had funded. We offered workshops, legal aid, and financial literacy classes for women over 60 who had been displaced, abandoned, or silenced. It grew faster than I imagined. Women came in droves, not just for the help, but for the community, for the chance to feel heard again. They brought stories like mine. And worse, we weren't helpless. We were just written off. And we were ready to rewrite everything. One day, while organizing donation baskets, a young reporter named Callie from the county newsletter asked to interview me. She had heard about the project and wanted to highlight a powerful woman making a difference. She was 25, bright-eyed, hopeful. She asked gently, "What made you decide to do this?" I thought for a moment, then replied, "I was asked to go back to a nursing home like a forgotten coat in a closet." That's when I realized something. We spend our lives giving love, time, energy, food, forgiveness. And one day, someone decides you've given enough, that it's time to be put away. But they forget. I looked at her and smiled. We never stopped being powerful. We were just quiet about it. She nodded, writing quickly. Before she left, she asked, "Do you regret anything?" "Only one thing," I said. "That I waited so long to say no. It's been just over a year now. A full cycle of seasons since I buried the man I loved and walked away from the family that forgot who I was. Some mornings, I still wake expecting to hear Thomas humming in the bathroom. It's funny how the memory of sound lingers long after the real thing fades. But grief softens, I've learned. It doesn't disappear. It simply shifts its weight until you can carry it without stumbling. My life is smaller now. Quieter. But it's mine. I wake up when I want to. I eat what I like, not what's scheduled by a facility or a daughter who thinks she knows best. I tend to my garden with dirt under my nails and the sun on my back. My tomatoes came in early this year, and my cucumbers are stubborn, just like Thomas always said I was. Every Friday, I host a gathering on my little porch, not a formal thing. Just a few women from the Still She Rises project. We sit with tea and old jazz playing from the radio, and we talk about everything from arthritis to dating again. Some laugh. Some cry. All of us heal a little more with each visit. I think we all just needed to be reminded that we are not disposable. That we are not done. I get letters now. Not from Jonah or Melanie, though I did receive a birthday card from Jonah's wife 2 months ago, and signed. It was nice.
Bland.
Like guilt with a stamp. But the letters I keep? They're from women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. Women who watched the video of my interview in the local newsletter that got picked up and shared online more times than I could have imagined. They write to say, "Thank you for reminding me I matter. I left my son's house and got an apartment of my own. Best decision I've made. I bought myself a piano. I'm learning at 74. Those letters are stacked in a wooden box next to my reading chair. I open them on rainy afternoons when the loneliness tries to creep in through the cracks. And each one feels like a hand on my shoulder, a whispered me too in the dark. Melanie hasn't visited. I don't think she knows how to face me, or maybe she believes I don't want to see her. She might be right for now. I've let go of the anger, but forgiveness is a process. And it can't be rushed by tears or timing. I don't hate her. I simply see her more clearly now. She was raised by a woman who gave everything, and like many who received too much, she forgot the cost of it. But I'm no longer trying to remind her. That burden is no longer mine to carry. I've learned that peace doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it arrives in solitude. In baking bread while music plays softly in the background. In watching birds nest under your roof. In waking up and knowing the day belongs only to you. And that kind of peace? It's hard-won. And worth every silent battle. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. But I am free. And freedom, especially in a woman of my age, is the loudest kind of victory there is. So, to whoever is watching or listening, maybe you're a daughter. Maybe you're a mother. Maybe you're both. Maybe someone recently made you feel like your story is over. Like your place is in the background. Like you're only useful if you're quiet and agreeable. Let me tell you this. You are not done. You are not fragile. And you are certainly not invisible. You have survived things that would flatten most people. You have cried into laundry, smiled through heartbreak, and held up entire generations with your bare hands. You do not need permission to begin again. So if someone tells you to go back to where they've placed you, whether that's a room, a role, or a silence, just smile.
And go.
Not back.
Forward.
Toward whatever life you choose. Because it's never too late to take your power back. If this story resonated with you, please share where you're watching from and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. We post true-to-life tales of love, betrayal, and quiet revenge told through the voices of women who've lived enough to know better. Thank you for watching.